Most of the bad things you've heard about GTA Online are true. It barely works. Its attempts at satire are juvenile and toothless. It bugs you constantly to start doing the latest thing because there's a decent chance you'll have to pay real money to start the latest thing. And that doesn't seem like it's actually part of the satire at all. The overall atmosphere is almost overbearingly obnoxious. Most of the community consists of the internet's very worst. It's a very grindy experience unless you do fork over that real money. And most of what you do in it is antagonize other people and consume. But I still played it a lot. I liked collecting the cars, dressing up my little criminals, and running around blowing stuff up for a bit. And there are plenty of decent people out there who do too. The more I played, the more I realized that even though my little criminals never spoke, had no established history, and betrayed very little in the way of an internal life, I'd sort of created a character through the things I'd collected. There are many different ways to characterize. This one isn't great, but it's still interesting, so I thought I'd examine it. And if you're thinking, this just seems like a threadbare excuse to show off a bunch of fake fancy cars, well, all I have to say to that is, no shit.
The track hits your eardrum like a slug to your chest. Back a vest for your Jimmy in the city of sex. We in that sunshine state where the bomb ass him be. The state where you never find a dance floor empty.
Greetings, loved ones. Let's take a journey.
My main character is Penny. She's a very successful criminal and started as a bit of a jab. The GTA games are always presented as crime epics, and they pull from a lot of crime epics for material, though there's always a question if they're picking the right crime epics to crib from given the strengths of the games. Online though, it seemed like you'd have the chance to get away from the discount Michael Mann riffs of the main game and just have plain old pulpy heisty fun. So I made Charlie, who was a little Charlie Croker, a little Brian O'Connor, and a little self-insert, and then started making Penny. There'd been some talk about the sorts of protagonists GTA games usually get, and I had my opinions, and now that I had control over what an online protagonist could look like, I could act on them. So not only was Penny a she wasn't white. I decided she was of Indian descent, even though there's no way to express that. Garage space was limited, and rather than just filling them at random, I decided Charlie would be into domestic cars, and Penny would get imports. Effectively, I gave them tastes. As you might imagine, there were a lot of female avatars with terrible face tattoos running around in bikinis, so I resolved that Penny would be a fastidious dresser, which gave her even more tastes. Eventually, Garage Space expanded enough that it was even more pointless to maintain two characters, and Penny had the better shoes, so I focused more on her, and soon her car collection expanded to what I'm about to show. This game does have a massive community, and there are interesting pockets of it that have done interesting things within the limitations of this game. There are elaborate role players that are dedicated to playing as regular people that exist in this world, and there were people even before the update that included biker gangs that formed their own ad hoc biker gangs within the game itself, and they rode around, and you had ranks, and if you weren't of a certain rank, you couldn't ride this certain bike. They had rules like an actual biker gang. There are people that are way into the racing aspect. I never really connected with any of those people. I just kind of played the game at random, and I'm interested more in the character that resulted from that random playing the way it was more or less intended to be played, rather than, being a role player. What are the things I can say about my character just within the systems that existed? This game doesn't let you speak. Your only choices are how to spend the fake money you make, but you do still get to make that choice. So, when items are literally the only way you can express a character, what does that look like? Character might turn out to be a stretch, but maybe Persona's a better fit, but maybe I hit something good enough for a pulpy heist movie. Let's see. This is the Pegassi Botti 801, based on a Ducati 848. Pegassi is a fake Italian company that is kind of Ducati and also kind of Lamborghini. Sports bikes were fun and fast, so Penny had a lot of them. This one was one of the fastest, or it could be the fastest, depending on what you were doing. This is the Principe Lectro, based on a Ducati Street Fighter S, and this was a powerfully mediocre bike, but it had a KERS system. That wasn't very helpful. Raking regenerates the boost, but bikes are so nimble you don't need to brake all that often. But Penny really liked the tech, so she wanted it. This is the Dinka Akuma, based on a Buell XB12S. It's one of Penny's earliest bikes. It was top tier when the game first came out, and it's still competitive, I think, even now. She really liked it. It was fun to ride, so she kept it. This is a Nagasaki BF400 based on Honda CB400. I didn't take this out all that often. It was a standard off-road bike that Penny kept around for when she needed to do off-road things. This is the Invetero Croquette Classic, based on a Corvette C2. Classic cars are my favorite, and this is the first one we'll see. So I'm pretty sure Penny's first proper American car. It's not her favorite or anything, but a 60s Corvette is still a 60s Corvette, even when it's not really that. This is the Western Wolfsbane, based on a Harley 1200 Custom. Penny likes all sorts of bikes, and this is one of her many cruisers. This is the Vapid Dominator, based on a Ford Mustang. It's one of Penny's first muscle acquisitions because it was kind of the best all around in that class at the time. I think there are a few that are now on top of it, but in case she needed it for racing purposes, Penny wanted to have the best of various classes available to her, and the Dominator was very, very good. It did tend to spin out or lose control like, you know, a muscle car should, so you needed kind of a soft touch to actually use it very well. This is the Dewbachee 770, based on an Aston Martin 177. Dewbachee's the game's fake Aston Martin brand, and Penny, as part of the Indian diaspora, I figured, probably had her spend her youth in England, and so she has an affinity for English car makers. They're what success looks like to her, and that's why she has this fine but kind of unremarkable car. This is the Western Gargoyle, based on an Indian 101 Scout. Was Penny into bikes enough to get a stunt bike? Yes. Yes, she was. I also really like Indian bikes, so we have it. The only thing is you couldn't remove this chain from the rear tire. It didn't do anything. It just looked odd. This is an Albany Roosevelt Valor based on a 1928 Cadillac 341A, and it has a history in the online game itself. As part of the first event the game ever had, you could buy a car very much like this, pretty much exactly like this, but it cost about $1 million and not many people got it, and then about a month later, the update went away. It was apparently a timed event sort of thing, so for a good long time, this car was just not available, and then finally they put it back out. It's a very odd way to run things. But anyway, I guess Penny had FOMO, because as soon as she could buy it, she bought it. It's one of the oldest cars in her collection. My grandfather has a bunch of models of cars from this era. I'm not sure if he has a Cadillac 341A, but he's got a lot of models that are very much like it, so it seemed appropriate to get it. It's also appropriate to have the Albany Frankenstange, based on the same car. It's just a modded up Valor, but Penny and I are both 90s kids. We listened to our share of Rob Zombie. This is the Pegassi Tempesta, based on a Lamborghini Huracan. Along with the British cars, Penny also favors Italian cars, and this is the first fake Lambo that shows up on the list, but it's not the first fake Lambo that she got. This one was acquired not too long before I kind of stopped playing the game, but it's very fun, and it's very, very effective. This is the Tough Dale Adder based on a Bugatti Super Veyron. And what a trip this car has been on. On initial release, this was the most expensive vehicle. It cost $1 million, so obviously it had to be the best. It cost $1 million. A lot of people bought them, and there were tacky, chromed out adders just everywhere. It was the mark of the douchebag for a long time. Then the testing community weighed in and revealed that no, the Adder wasn't the best car. It kind of wasn't even close to the best car, primarily because it lacked a spoiler, and then it just vanished overnight as the douche pick. They moved on to a far, far uglier car, and suddenly Penny and I were free to get this thing that we liked because it's weird. It looks like a curved space pod. This is the Albany Manana, based on a Buick LeSabre. I'm not sure why we had this. I was a little surprised to find it in the garage, to be honest. Maybe Penny pulled in drunk with it one night? Who knows? I'm really baffled. This is the Bravado Gauntlet, based on a Dodge Challenger. This was one of the best muscle cars in the game, and Penny admired its simplicity. Cars over a certain value you couldn't swipe off the street and put into your garage. You had to buy them off the website. But the Gauntlet, you could just grab it one, drive it into your garage, and then it was yours. And that's a pretty good deal for one of the best muscle cars in the game. This is the Shitzu Hakuchou, based on a Suzuki Hayabusa. Boy, great sense of humor this game has, doesn't it? You get it? Anyway, this was the best bike for a good long time, and it was a really, really solid sports bike. It was very hard to get knocked off of it. Penny loved riding this so much that when a slightly modified version, the Shitzu Hakuchou Drag, came out, she decided she needed that one too, and she'd keep them both. This is the Ennis Stafford, based on a Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud. While I was making this inventory, the casino expansion came out and you could win cars in it. And I was waiting for the sun to come up so I could record some footage and won this car at random. It's not something Penny would have sought out, but it doesn't look so bad. And it's free, so she's cool with that. This is the Western Cliffhanger, based on a Harley-Davidson XR750. This is Penny's other stunt bike. While she preferred the Gargoyle, this one didn't have the rear tire chain. This is the Pegassi Esky, based on a Ducati Scrambler. It's just another off-road bike Penny kept around for special occasions. It was easy to win off-road races because a lot of people didn't understand the class, so it's good to have a nice solid off-road bike for that purpose. This is the Western Zombie Chopper, based on a Harley Exile, and the Western Zombie Bobber, based on a Harley Exile Hot Rod. These cruisers are basically the exact same bike, they just have some slightly different parts and modifications. But since they had those different looks, Penny liked them both. She wanted them both, especially the pink one. This is the Pegassi Infernus, which is based on a Lamborghini Murcielago, which you might recognize from going for a swim in Fate of the Furious. This car has a long history in the series, so I have a lot of affection for it, and like I said, Penny likes Italian cars. This is the Grotti Carbonizzare, based on a Ferrari F12. Pegassi is the fake Lamborghini and Grotti is the fake Ferrari company. This was a reasonable early purchase that Penny made. It was nothing special, but it was cheap and it was very effective at the time. She kept it around for sentimental reasons, and because it's a proper convertible. This is the Overflood Entity XF, based on a Koenigsegg CCX, which you might recognize from there being 2 in the Western Hemisphere at the end of Fast 5. Penny was really excited by this very well-designed car from a hot new company hailing from a country not known for fancy cars. I screwed up my history earlier. This was the actual best car when the game first launched, so this is the car that all the douchebags moved on to, and there are a bunch of chromed-out versions of it running around. After there are a bunch of chromed-out versions of the Adder running around. But since this was legitimately the best car, Penny did want it for a while, and so she got it. Eventually they moved on to the actual ugliest car in the entire game, so I missed a step there. But it's good they did, because this is a great car. This is the Pegassi Vortex, based on a Ducati 1199 Panigale. It's a middle-of-the-road sport bike. Penny had one for the hell of it. I think for a while she was trying to have every bike you could possibly have in the game, and succeeded. This is the Dewbachee Spectre, based on an Aston Martin DB10, which you might recognize being driven by Daniel Craig's James Bond in a terrible Bond movie. It's another from Penny's English car collection. She owned it for the hell of it because it wasn't that impressive otherwise. This is the Weeny Issi, based on a mini hatch, which you might recognize from the 2003 Italian Job. This was actually Penny's first car. When you started playing, you could pick from a few basic cars, and this is the one I got. It was peppy and agile, and you could put the top up or down. It's great. She'd take it out every once in a while and just cruise. And this is the Weeny Issi Classic, based on a mini MK2, which you might recognize from the 1969 Italian Job. I think Penny grew up with this Michael Caine classic, so as soon as she was able to get this iconic car, she did. This is the Coil Cyclone, based on a Rimac Concept 1. It's an Eastern European car company, I don't know. Coil is the game's fake Tesla, so all of their cars are electric. They all have basically instant acceleration, but weren't great for performance otherwise. This should have made them at least interesting in races, but it never worked out that way. Penny didn't care though, she really liked the technology and wanted to support it. This is the Pegassi Faggio mod, because, again, this game's sense of humor is just really great and aged very, very well, based on a Vespa. Penny would have been born toward the end of the mod revival in the middle of the two-tone era. Also, this thing rules, everyone would want it. This is the Pegassi Monroe, based on the Lamborghini Miura, which you might recognize from crashing in the opening credits of the 1969 Italian Job. Did Penny's love of cars start with this? Probably not. This car should be historically significant, if indeed Pegassi is the equivalent of Lamborghini. That means this is the first Pegassi. And that's the main reason she had it. This is an Invetero Croquette BlackFin, based on a Corvette C1. Penny felt this had better lines than the Croquette Classic. That was a bit more angular and pinched than she preferred. For some reason, this one was classified as a muscle car, not a sports classic. Classes in this game were just a mess. This is the Albany Buccaneer, based on a Buick Riviera. Penny decided she wanted a lowrider, so she tricked out a lowrider. The results are pretty great, if I say so myself. This is an LSC Avarus, based on an Orange County Choppers T-Rex. This cruiser isn't quite the Easy Rider Captain America bike, but it's about as close as any bike in the game comes to that sort of tall, sleek profile. This is the Pegassi Reaper, based on the Lycan Hypersport, which you might recognize from flying in Furious 7. Felt like there was a big hype wave around the Hypersport when they added this to the game. Like, it showed up in Furious 7 too. And Penny, she's apparently not immune to hype. She heard about the diamonds in the headlights, and well, she needed to see that for herself. It's a bit middling. Neither of us really like the look. It doesn't perform much better than plenty of other supercars. It performs worse than a lot of them. We kept it around as a tribute to excess and how we can be duped too. Or at least we did until we found out about the Vapid Ellie, based on a Ford Mustang Shelby GT 500. I have no idea why it took so fucking long for them to get the bullet car into this game. That would have been one of the first things I would have demanded, and I worked on it anyway. It seems like such an easy slam dunk, but whatever. Sometime between when I stopped playing and logged on again to make this inventory, this car came out, and it's glorious. Penny has long desired this car, so as soon as we found it was available, it was a real easy choice to sell the Reaper for this one. It's clearly much more based on the original Gone in 60 Seconds car, but who cares? Close enough. It's the bullet car. This is the Albany Hermes, based on a Buick Super. This is another one Penny admires purely for the aesthetics. She likes its old school 50s charm and low, scary spaceship vibe. I think if Biff Tannen had designed a landing craft, this is what would have turned out. It's wonderful. This is the Pegassi Osiris, based on a Pagani Huayra. Penny can go on about the engineering of this supercar. I really just wanted the gull-wing doors. I think gull-wing doors are neat. This is the Dinka Jester, based on a Honda NSX. This is a hybrid that could compete in the top tier of sports cars. So Penny loved the tech, and the fact that it performed very well when, as we mentioned, a lot of the electric cars didn't, was very, very appealing. Also, the car just looks great. It's one of our favorites. This is the Western Bagger, based on a Harley Touring Road Glide. This is a pretty low tier bike. It was slow, not all that maneuver, just all around not that great. But I really liked the panniers, and when you take off the fairing, it looked pretty cool. Gave the bike a nice lived-in feel that appealed to Penny.
Your number 14,000 for today. Oh, if you ain't got the do-re-mi, folks, you ain't got the do-re-mi.
This is the Benetactor Stirling GT, based on a Mercedes-Benz 300 SLR. This is one of the rare German cars in Penny's collection. She just seemed to not especially care for, that solid, brusque German efficiency. And Benetactor was the Mercedes-Benz and BMW stand-in in the game. But we used to use this car to basically roll people. There were a bunch of modifications you could only unlock for cars if you won a stupid number of races, like 150 or something like that. And races could be really miserable. Everybody brought their tackiest supercar, and everybody slammed into each other as soon as it was time to go, and it was just kind of a grotesque mess. But not a lot of people knew the Sports Classic class all that well, so you could exploit that ignorance by hosting your own Sports Classic races and rack up easy wins, which you needed to unlock everything. And this car destroys the Sports Classic class. It's actually broken and should be classified differently, but you know, we wanted to get all the paint jobs we could, so tough shit. This is the Toughdale Nero, based on a Bugatti Chiron. Seems like this car was intended to be a fix for the adder. I mean, specifically, they added a spoiler that raises and lowers automatically when you go fast enough to get a spoiler. Not sure if it worked, but I liked having different paint style options for this weirdo space car. This is the Dewbachee JB700, based on an Aston Martin DB5, which you might recognize being driven by Connery, Brosnan, and Craig James Bonds in some of the very best James Bond movies. The one thing that mars this otherwise great car, though, are the stupid little gun thingies in the front end. I really wish you could get rid of them. This is the Western Sovereign, based on a Harley-Davidson Road King. Eh. This one was always slated to be removed from the garages. It just never happened. The tacky flag paint job is the sort of flag code violation that people who angrily insist the flag should be respected are way into. Penny was not way into that. This is one of those trying to collect everything of one type situations, and we sold it while making this video. Not sure what we replaced it with, I forget, but it's gone now. This is the Bravado Verlierer, based on a TVR Sagaris. Whatever. It's another weird one that earned Penny's respect just because it looks weird. This is the DeClasse Tampa, based on a Ford Mustang. Not a Shelby Ford Mustang, if you needed that pointed out. So, it's still pretty cool on its own, especially with the pink highlights. This is the Toughdale Z-Type, or Z-Type if you prefer, based on the Bugatti Type 57 SC. For the longest time, this was the actual fastest vehicle in the game, at least on a straightaway. Something about it having a V12 or something. I picked that up about the Bugatti Type 57 SC at some point. I'm not sure how true that is, though. Anyway, it's got a very, very cool look. Didn't exactly turn great, but, you know, it led me to learn about that original Bugatti. It's a nice little history lesson. Penny naturally knew all about it already, and she loves this design. This is the Coil Voltic, based on a Tesla Roadster. This is the original all-electric supercar in the game, and it had the same high acceleration, middling performance issue, but Penny took it out a lot. It just seemed to fit her. This is the Imponte Phoenix, based on a Pontiac Firebird Trans Am, which you might have seen solving crimes with David Hasselhoff, and what can I say? Penny and I both remember the 80s. This is the Karin Sultan RS, based on a Lexus IS. We painted this up street racer style because even though Penny and I think a bunch of logos all over your car is really tacky, wherever she goes, she looks like she belongs. So when she needs to deal with a bunch of tacky street racers, she looks like she belongs there and has her own tacky street racer to bring out. This is the Bravado Gauntlet Classic, based on a Dodge Challenger G1. This is another acquisition that we made while I was collecting footage. This had come out at some point, and had to have it. It's not a Charger, which a certain iconic street racer uses all the time, and this is based on a Challenger, but they look pretty close. They look close enough that I suspect we're not going to see a classic Charger, and we're stuck with this one. But I say stuck. This thing still looks pretty damn great. This is the Grotti Stinger, based on a Ferrari 250 GT California Spider, with a Y. This is Penny's go-to car for a long, long time. She's basically a Tarantino character, so having a fixation on Steve McQueen and his various cars, that just seemed to fit. This is the DeClasse Sabre Turbo, based on a Chevy Chevelle. This is a pretty common muscle car that you could just steal off the street, so when Penny had enough garage space to get into that type of car, this was a good, solid trial entry. This is the Western Demon. I tried to say Daemon, but it kept sounding like Damon. Anyway, based on a Harley-Davidson FXST Softail. This is a gang-specific vehicle you had to steal, like, from the gang itself and then stash in your garage. That used to be a lot more common in GTA games, but there weren't too many of them in this game. In fact, this is really the only gang-specific vehicle. Later, they released a purchasable version with more customizing options, but it didn't have the brand on the seat for the biker gang. Penny kept both because she worked for that first one, so she's gonna keep it. This is the Pfister 811, based on a Porsche 918, and there's that wonderful sense of humor again. This is another very, very rare German car in Penny's collection. She'd kind of appreciate its oddness, add a bit more whimsy than a lot of the German cars. This is the Vapid Peyote, based on a Ford Thunderbird. Just look at it. I don't think I need to explain why this is a great car in Penny's collection. This is the DeClasse Tornado, based on a Chevrolet Bel Air, which you might recognize from my uncle's garage. I think this is one of the slowest cars in the game, certainly the slowest that Penny has, but chrome highlights, she liked that. This is the HVY Insurgent, based on a TAV Gurkha, which you might recognize wrecking Dom's Charger in Fast 5. It was a very, very useful car because it was armored against explosives, so people couldn't blow you up, and that's great in an environment full of screechy children throwing rockets at you between epithets. But Penny just had no patience for the tactical aesthetic. For a while it seemed the game was going to lead way harder into that, so I kind of stopped playing. This thing's fine, but look at it. It's ugly. Like all things tactical, it's the antithesis of cool. It's some try-hard bullshit, but whatever. Nobody can blow you up in it. This is the Pegassi FCR 1000 Custom, based on a Ducati R100. You could really customize this bike and paint decided on this sort of World War II aesthetic when she decided on her customization. It didn't quite work, but it's still pretty cool anyway. This is the Grotti Turismo R, based on a Ferrari LaFerrari. The Turismo doesn't have as long a legacy in the game as the Infernus does, and this is a Turismo R, so technically this is its first appearance in any game, but you know, it performed really well. It was a good car. This is a Lampadati Casco, based on a Maserati 3500 GT. You had to do a really obnoxious mission to unlock the ability to purchase this car, so once I could, I damn well was gonna get one. Penny fell in love with driving it on that mission, and also there's just this brutally hateful NPC in that part of the game, squawking in your ear about how you'll never own one, so she went and bought one. Fuck you, hateful NPC. This is the Dewbachee Rapid GT Classic, based on a Jensen Interceptor, which you may recognize from being raced around London by an amnesiac. When I conceived of this video, I didn't plan on getting any new cars, but I logged on, I had a bunch of money left over, so I got one, and then, found out about some others, and then just when I thought I was fully out, they just up and gave everyone $1 million because it was the game's anniversary. So Penny was able to acquire this classic of British car engineering. I think it goes pretty well with the Vapidelli, actually.
It's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. We've come a long way.
This is the Dinka Jester Classic. This is the Volcar Warrener. This is the Vapid Retinue. This is the Honest Elegy Retro. And this is the Honest Elegy RH8. They are based on a Toyota Supra JZA80, a Nissan Skyline GTR KGC10, a Ford Mark I Escort, a Nissan Skyline GTR R35, and a Nissan Skyline GTR BNR32. You might recognize them from doing things such as smoking a Ferrari, bringing Brian and Mia to Brazil, fighting a tank, power sliding across the finish line, and fighting a drone. A bunch of our cars have themes, and these obviously are Paul Walker cars. The actor died about a month after the game launched, and since he was a force in car culture and starred in the dominant car movies of our time, it only made sense that a lot of cars his character drove would end up in the game somehow, and when they showed up, it also felt right to pay tribute to his legacy in this small, kind of silly, but also very earnest way, which matches the movies, now that I think about it. Paul Walker's Brian O'Connor stood out because as the movies went on and the cast changed, he essentially became the token white guy, but he never acted like a token white guy is expected to act, the way a lot of the white guys in the main GTA game acted. No, he was always decent and treated people decently, and they responded in kind. And I like to think that maybe Penny saw some of that and dreamed of meeting someone not unlike Paul Walker's Brian O'Connor, who just recognized skills and was confident enough in his own skill, didn't matter how the world changed around him. This is the Western Nightblade, based on an Orange County Chopper's Dyna Street Bob. This is the fastest cruiser-type bike, which is still pretty slow for bikes, but we preferred cruisers, so I used this one a lot. It had good power, it was nimble, you could drive it with confidence, it was solid and burly, and it was a bike that was hard to get thrown from. That's a very important trait in this game. This is the Dewbachee Massacro, based on an Aston Martin Vanquish, which you might recognize being driven by Brosnan's Bond in a very terrible Bond movie. I love this car. It was the best sports car for a long time, handled better than a bunch of the supercars, so not a lot of people were aware of it. I'd hear people wondering what this car was a fair bit. Penny really enjoyed it too. I mean, good performance, good look. She really felt like she had made it, owning this piece of British imperialism. This is a Canis Kalahari, based on a Citroen Mahari. It's not the fanciest car, certainly not the fastest, but we love it. It's very cool, it's distinctive, and it's rare. Penny really needed a casual ride she could just ramble about the beach with, and it seemed very her for it to be something very obscure and strange. This is the ProGen T20, based on a McLaren P1, and this is considered the best supercar around the time I stopped playing, and it was our favorite. It's fast and it's responsive, and thought it looked the best. It's very sleek, so you get the up and down spoiler, so you're not ruining your car's profile with a big old spoiler on the back. A lot of supercars seemed really wide, but the T20 wasn't, so it just felt much more maneuverable. You could get through some really tight spots nice and slick. Great car. If it looked the best, and it was the best, then Penny wanted to have it. This is the Classe Mamba, based on an AC Cobra Mark III. This is our absolute favorite car in Penny's collection. It was rarely appropriate, but we took it out all the time. It's pretty hard to control. It spun out pretty easily, but as far as iconic cool goes, it's tough to get much more iconic than this, and it just seems to suit Penny very, very well. It seems important to recognize the king of automotive characterization, Walter Hartwell White's 2004 Pontiac Aztek. It's so genius, it's so perfect. It tells a full story just sitting there in his driveway. One single item pretty much tells you everything you need to know about Walt at the start of Breaking Bad. And out of all of Penny's cars, none of them are that great. Are you kidding? Come on. But I do think there are conclusions to be drawn about who Penny is regardless. I've hinted or alluded or outright said what I think some of those conclusions are, but ultimately, all of you, the people who look upon her materials, determine for yourselves what those materials say about her. And she's hardly alone or special in that. The online game is full of characters expressing personality without saying a word. Plenty of these guys are telling you exactly what they want you to know about them without saying a thing. Deal with this game's NPCs long enough, and you'll quickly see the virtue in that.
Just watch me go. from the eastern seaboard, the landlocked Midwest, the Keys, the Alps, the Black Hills, and Budapest. With my heart in a sling, tail between my legs a swinging, I'm sorry for leaving. But when the palm trees bow their heads, no matter how wrong I've been, LA, you always let me back in. And you can bet